also have an issue where you got guys like Junior Seau, like putting a gun in their chest and shooting themselves and leaving a note saying, "Look at my brain, something is wrong."
Right.
Junior for me was, gave me my welcome to the NFL moment. When I went to the Pro Bowl, Junior drank me under the table, took me under his wing, and so him committing suicide was massively impactful, and really just kind of started me down the path of like, how do I heal my brain? How do I make sure that this doesn't happen?
Well, your brain is obviously healed at this point, but
and then some.
So that's you've got an interesting insight into this.
Yeah.
Into the brain injuries and football situation. Tell us about.
So when I retired from the NFL, so I had, obviously graduated in 4 years and then got worked on my master's in my fifth. You're going to laugh at this, but part of my master's thesis was had to be done while I was in the NFL. So Herb Simons wanted me to write my master's thesis, which is why do players, if we assume education is how people pull themselves out of poverty and destitute, why is it that young athletes are so willing to forego to go to professional sports?
Right.
And we all know the answer. But the exercise had to be done, and he wanted me to write it from a college and a professional deal. And then I because of some things I said, I wasn't allowed to come back and hand it in. So higher education, right? But there was also a scholarship that I was interested in to go to UC Berkeley's Bolt Hall. Now it's just called Berkeley Law. And Adrian Cragen's scholarship for a 4-year letterman. So that's what I was kind of gearing up for. And then I got drafted to go play. And I figured I'd play for a year or two and go back to law school, and that turned into 10.
Right.
So when I retired, I kind of fired my stuff back up and started looking at law schools and kind of starting that initial piece. And just about that time is when Greg Glassman called me and asked me to help come develop their technology on how to train athletes with CrossFit football. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking this might be good to do for a little bit of time while I kind of tend to maybe fix some of the damage that might have happened, because the only analogy I can give for it is imagine you have like a big bucket of soapy water, right? And you put a T-shirt in there, like in the sopping wet T-shirt and soapy water. That's the analogy I think about how my brain felt when I retired from the NFL.
Yeah.
I just felt like a soppy, soapy T-shirt in a bucket of like warm water. And
so your perceptions, you think, were altered?
Yeah.
And vision and hearing and everything, or just
100%. Yeah, it was 100%, because when I went back and pulled out my laptop and all my thesis stuff and everything that I'd been working on, and I read what I had written before,
right,
I was not able to do that. Just cognitively, I didn't have the capacity, right? I probably hadn't sharpened in the blade as much as I should have, but I just knew that I wasn't. And a big part of CrossFit football for me and doing the initial deal that I did was like I felt that was my opportunity to go out and resharpen my blade, that I was going to read, I was going to write, I was going to develop seminars and get on my feet and speak.
Just work the brain.
Yeah. And
let it heal.
Yeah.
Make it heal.
Make it heal. And so about that time, once I started traveling and doing that, I was reached out by, through the NFL, Dr. Amen from the Amen Clinics, who kind of quacky, if I like now, if I look through social media, but had a real high-end kind of brain center in Newport Beach. Mm-hmm. So they reached out and they asked if I would be in a brain study for Dr. Amen. So they came in, did all this brain mapping and CT scans and MRIs, and had us sit in all these groups. And I get to the very end of the testing, and we sit down, and he's like, we got good news and bad news, which is what always people say to you. What do you want first? I'll take the good news first, right? And he goes, well, of everybody that we tested, you were the smartest person we tested.
All right.
And I was like, oh, okay. Well, like, of everybody? He's like, well, the NFL guys. I'm like, all right. That's like being like the best looking of the ugly kids, right? And I was like, all right. So cognitively, I'm the smartest dude they tested. But the bad news, the part of your brain that's damaged is over here on the frontal lobe, this part of this brain that doesn't light up, and this is where your brain damage is, and this is the part of your brain that deals with sympathy and empathy and emotion. And as I was listening to him, I was like, wait a minute. And so he's getting into like all these things you can do, and I was like, can I get like a doctor's note on this? Because there's no way my wife and my mom are going to believe that I actually have a brain condition that makes me an insensitive asshole.
Because you've never been an insensitive.
Never, right?
Never
Never
been an insensitive. I've known you 15 years.
Yeah, and
that's not a description for you.
So as I sat down, and then they put us into these kind of general groups of other NFL players, and I'm sitting around with these groups, and I'm listening to these fucking pity party. You know, this guy's 400 pounds. This guy's got early onset Alzheimer's,
right?
And I'm like sitting in this group of people, and I kind of got a bit of a panic attack that you're the sum of the people you're around. So I just stood up and I said, "Thank you for everything you've done. I'll never hear from you again." And I fucking walked out of that place and left that pity party behind. And the first thing I did is I called Matt Lalonde. If you remember Matt Lalonde, I said, "Matt, I have a brain deal," and I explained it to him, and I was like, "What can I do?" So he called me back a day or two later and said, "I pulled 10,000 research articles, and we looked at this, and I think you should start with a ketogenic diet." So I researched a ketogenic diet and proceeded to eat a ketogenic diet and didn't eat a carb for almost 2 years.
Right.
And by the end of that, I remember Rob Wolf had called me, and I started to feel a lot better, like just cognitively a little sharper, and some of the effects. And we started, supplementation, and I started going down. It was fish oil and, a lot of the creatine, which I think I'm the longest continuous creatine user on the planet. I started when I was 14, 10 grams of creatine a day since I was 14 years old. And now we know creatine's a massive neuroprotectant. So creatine, fish oil, and, I started traveling and teaching and having to lecture and present and create, and I was effectively forcing myself to do things that I was nervous to do because I worried that what if I didn't have the cognitive ability to have to go out and show up on a Friday with a backpack or a bag and walk in and meet a brand new gym of people and do your best to stand up and educate them and wow them and then get back on. And you did it. Like that's what's interesting is there's a few people, Kelly Starrett, you, me, Bergner, and a handful of others that did that at mass scale and did it and had the ability to not only execute it but do it well to actually get people to come more and more.
Right.
And there was blogs, there was information. Like I was, you came in with starting strength and your linear progression and what you taught. I didn't know what the fuck I was teaching. I had to literally create it in real time.
Right.
What you see for power athlete and fostering and developing athleticism, none of that existed when they asked me to do CrossFit football. All of this developed like on the fly, teaching seminars, trying to figure out my technology and, writing. I mean, my blog, Talk to Me Johnny, with hundreds of entries based on questions, programming, training athletes. I mean, this kind of, splinter in my mind, this Neo moment, fostered because I was forced to go up and do this.
Right.
And I don't like to look stupid. And, there was a real issue. So it started me down the road of this, like the thing that if I can remove the stimulus that's damaging my brain, which I use football, right? You can put on a helmet, I'm going to use it as a weapon and smash, remove, the gut-brain barrier. Now all of a sudden I'm going to clean up the diet and see if I can fix it that way. And then there were other things that we looked at. And that really started me down the fact of learning and, everything from, going to Ralphing to get myofascial release to remove some of the fascia in my head because the skull was so tight, seeing Dr. Bueller and doing some of the cranial manipulations. Mm-hmm. All of those things were just a piece. And then the real big one was after I had shoulder surgery, I went down to Arizona to go see Tom Incledon, who's from Cosenta, who's one of my doctor buddies, and he did this treatment with exosomes. So he injected exosomes in the shoulder, then did an IV at exosomes. And about 12 hours after they did it, whatever inflammation was left in the brain just was fucking wiped away. So the exosomes are real small, move across the blood-brain barrier, and removed whatever inflammation was going on in my skull.
And you could feel that happening?
It was night and day. I was sitting there, and it was like all of a sudden I felt this warm buzzing feeling, like I'd had a drink, but I hadn't had a drink. And we started, I was having a conversation, and it was almost like a little bit of an out of body where I was like in my head thinking, man, you sound a lot sharper than you've ever been.
Next week on Starting Strength Radio, we are going to join, you guys are going to join.
Am I joining or who's joining? Are they joining us?
They are going to join us for our conversation.
Oh, I can't wait.
John Welbourn is here, and we will talk to you guys for about an hour and 45 minutes next time about just whatever the fuck drops into our mind.
I hope it's an hour 45 and they don't cut too much of it out.
I think it would. No, some of it has to be cut out. It'll end up being an hour and 43 minutes.
Okay. All right. As long as we're close. So we'll
see you guys next time on Starting Strength Radio.